Okay. So, the thing that I wanted to talk about is basically like setting up a SSH key on GitHub and to allow yourself the opportunity to make it more secure, basically to secure your Git environment locally. And so some of y'all might be getting that issue where OD is like, oh, you can't do this operation with Git. You can't push, you can't pull, you can't do whatever because you don't have a Git a token, an access token set up. And the reason that is doing that is because there's a couple of ways that Git from your local computer makes a request to GitHub to like actually interact with the GitHub account. And prior to a few months or so ago, we were able to use just regular kind of like your password and email to like make an authenticated request. But as of recently, GitHub is asking us to do a little bit more stuff for security purposes. And so it asks you to either add an access token or you have another option, which is to authenticate your account fully with SSH, which allows for you to securely connect to GitHub and to do all the operations that you would do normally with GitHub. So what I wanted to do is just talk about that real quick and to provide some context to how you would set up the SSH stuff on GitHub for yourself if you were doing it for the first time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm on GitHub right now, and I just want to walk you through what you have to do in order to create an SSH key and set it up on GitHub. And GitHub actually makes it very simple. If you were to do this on your own and you want to kind of see a listed step-by-step breakdown of what to do, all you got to do is type in like Git in Google, like add SSH key to GitHub. And there's a really dope set of docs from GitHub that will explain how to do it very easily, step by step. And so, yeah, we'll just walk through those steps. And so these are the steps that you're going to want to do in order to set up SSH onto your local, in your GitHub local environment on your local computer. So there are basically what an SSH key is a it's a key that is saved onto your local machine that's comprised of two parts. One is a private part and one is a public part. And your computer basically holds on to one part of that key. And then whenever you start making requests to another machine, you set it up so that other machine has the other part of the key. And then whenever you're making requests, those two machines talk to each other and share the other key to the other computer to make sure that they're making an authenticated request. And so SSH is just one type of way that requests can get made. And it's a secure way to ensure that you're connected to a server or you're connected to another computer in a fashion that is secure. So with GitHub, for some of y'all, you might already have some SSH keys already created on your machine. I'm going to assume that you don't have any. For those of y'all who do have some, you might want to check for these existing keys, which you can do to just see if you have any SSH keys in your terminal. What you can do is open a new terminal. Oops, I'm just going to open a new terminal and make sure this isn't full. Oops, I don't want this to be full screen. Open another terminal, and then I'm just going to bring it up here so we can all see it. You can run this command that they're telling you to check. So if you do ls, which is the list storage command, -al, and then ~/.ssh, it will let you know what are the actual SSH configurations you have. I already have a GitHub key set up and some other keys set up for other drawings that I've been working on. But for you probably don't have any set up, which is cool. So if you do have some set up, you're just going to want to be aware of that. Otherwise, if you don't, you can create a new SSH key. Either way, what we're going to do today is just generate a new SSH key. So this is the step that you're going to want to take in order to make sure on your local environment you have SSH key set up. And of course, you're going to want to do it based on whatever operating system you're using. So if you're using a Mac, which I'm using, I'll walk through it for Mac, but the commands are different for Windows and Linux slightly. So make sure you're kind of selected on the right operating system that you want to use. And we've already checked to see if we have any existing SSH keys. For if you're using a Mac, what you're going to want to do is open up the terminal again and paste this text below that is essentially creating a new SSH key with for you to use with your GitHub account. So the command you're going to type is SSH-keygen space -t space ED25519 space -C, and then another space with inside of quotation marks, your email. So if I were to do that on my terminal, again, I already did it. So I'm not going to fully just do it again, but I'm just going to kind of show you all as if I was doing it again for the first time. So what I will do is SSH-keygen -T ED25519 -C, and then my email for GitHub is I don't really remember, but let's pretend it's my business email. And then I would enter that command. And what that command is going to do is it's going to generate a new key pair for you to use that is made of this particular type. ED25519 is a specific type of key pair. And you're giving it kind of some context that is going to, I feel like this is like a comment that kind of goes with it, with the key pair, that just lets you know, like, oh, like this message could be really anything, but for the sake of clarity, they're saying, hey, just put your email in there for yourself. When you run that command, it should tell you that it's creating a new SSH key pair, and it creates a label with your email. That's what the -C does, is a label. So it generates that new key pair, and it's going to ask you, where do you want to save this key pair? Like, where do you want to save it at? And by default, it's going to ask you if you want to save it on a Mac on your .ssh folder. So you should just press enter to have it saved there. And that's the typical space where you want to save your keys, is in your .ssh folder. So just press enter when you get that prompt, and then it will ask you to secure that key. You can pass a password. So if you want to make your key secure, even more secure, you might want to make sure that you put a password on it, so that if, for instance, somebody hacks you and tries to make an SSH request from your machine, they can't without knowing this password. But if you're like, YOLO, I'm not going to do that, you could just leave it blank and not have a password. So take a second, add a passcode, and once you press enter, it'll ask you to confirm the password, the passphrase you typed. And after you've done that, it'll generate the new key pair, and it'll save it in that .ssh folder for you. So once you've done that step, you should be able to run the this ls-al command again, and you should be able to see that you have a new key pair kind of created there with that ED25519 like format, right? You should see something like this. ID _ED25519 or something like that. And that's great. That means that you set up the key, you set up your SSH key the right way. Then the next step you want to do is add the SSH key on the Mac. On the Mac, you can add the SSH key to your SSH agent, and they kind of walk you through the steps of doing that here. I believe on like a Windows machine, it's a little different. You can still add the SSH key to the SSH agent, but yeah, I guess the commands are actually the same. So what you might want to do is make sure that you are able to save that SSH key so that you can easily use it over and over again. So on a Mac, you can start up the SSH agent in your terminal. You're just going to run that command. Oops, where'd my terminal go? Oh, I closed it. Dang, rookie mistake. Oh no, is it here? Yeah, no, I closed it. So then in the SSH, within your terminal, you're gonna wanna run this command, eval, quotation marks, SSH-agent -s, and then that's gonna start up your SSH agent and give you the process ID. So whatever that process ID is. And then you are going to have to edit your SSH config file to make sure that you load the key that you created into your SSH agent so that it will save it on your keychain so that it can make reference to it easier, and you don't have to, it'll just make reference to that same key that you created a little bit easier. So what you're gonna want to do is first check to see if you have a config file within your SSH folder. If you're just doing this for the first time and you've never really worked with key pairs or any of that, you probably don't have one, but it's still a good idea to make sure that you to check and see if you do. So what you can do is you can try to do this command that it says open ~/.ssh/config, which will open up, it'll try to open that file for you if you have it. Otherwise, it'll tell you, hey, I actually don't have this file, so it doesn't exist. But another way to check if it exists, and really kind of what I would say to do, is just run this command what we're gonna do is run a command in the terminal to edit this particular, you can edit this particular file. So the reason they try to open it is so that you can try to make changes to it. If it doesn't exist, you have to create it. And I guess the reason they try to touch it is the touch command creates a new file for you. So it's basically creating a new file at this position in this path for you. So at the inside of your .ssh folder is creating a new file called config. So then the last couple steps that you have to do is you just got to write this specific syntax into your file. So you say host, and then you say add keys to agent, use keychain, and you say identity file. And this should be cool for right now. If you are working with a couple of other platforms and you like know that some platforms are going to be using GitHub, sometimes you're going to be using another one, right? You're going to want to set that host up a little bit more specifically. So if I were to run that command that they talked about before, so open ~.ssh/config, it opens it up in a note app for me. So I have a couple of different hosts because I use GitHub and I use GitLab. So on GitHub, right, I just have host github.com, but it's the same thing that it asks you to do here. So if you don't plan on using multiple different providers for your SSH stuff, you could just use the host asterisk. But if you want to be more specific, you could have it say host, and instead of this asterisk, it could say GitHub, which will allow you to be GitHub.com, excuse me, which will be very specific to whenever you're trying to connect to GitHub.com, it's going to use this particular identity file. For those of y'all who were paying attention when I was running those commands earlier, you saw that I had a couple of different identity files. So I named one for GitHub and I had another one named for GitLab. But that's just something for if you have multiple stuff already. If you don't, and you're just doing this for the first time, again, you could just literally follow this and have add this into that config file for yourself. By doing this, what you're basically saying is whenever I go to a host that is asking for my SSH key, I'm going to use this particular identity file, which is the one that you created earlier when we first ran this SSH keygen command at the beginning. And so essentially all we're saying is, hey, we started the SSH agent, opened up the SSH config file, added this specific information to it, into that file. And with that information now added, it adds our key to our agent, to the SSH agent. It uses the keychain so that it will ask us if we want to save that password that we type into keychain, so for easier access. And then it also points to a specific identity file, and that's on a Mac. I'm pretty sure the things that change is like if we were on Windows or Linux, the way those commands work would change. So again, just make sure that you're looking at the specific operating system that you use. And then the last thing that you got to do is make sure you add this key to the SSH agent. So you're going to run this command SSH-add -K with the path to your identity file that we were just talking about. So that's going to be, if you were following all of these steps, it's going to be ~/.sh/ID_ed25519. And by running this command, you're essentially telling that SSH agent that we just started earlier to add that particular key that we just created into the SSH agent to be used easier. And yeah, and once you've done that, you've basically done the hard part. You created the SSH key, added it to the agent, and created the host config file that you needed to create in order to very specifically specify whenever someone's going to this particular host, what identity file to use. By using the asterisk, it just says, hey, whenever anyone's connecting to, whenever host we're connecting to, we're going to use this identity file. Yeah, once you've added it to the agent, like I said, you did the hard part. So the next thing that we want to do is add that SSH key to our GitHub account. And so in order to do that, we're just going to follow this next step that says adding a new SSH key to your GitHub account. So I'll hit that link. And so we already generated the new one. So now all you have to do is copy the SSH public key that you need, and then we're going to save it into GitHub for ourselves. So you're going to run in the terminal. Again, you're going to want to make sure you're following along with whatever operating system that you're using. So for me, I'm going to still using the Mac. So I'm going to use this pbcopy command. And I'm going to take the output. I'm going to basically pass into this pbcopy command the input from this particular file. So that's what this syntax is saying. So I'm taking this information from that SSH folder so that we added this key to. I'm gonna use pbcopy, which is a specific command on your Mac that allows you to copy the basically copy contents from a specific file. So this pbcopy is going to copy this information from this file and put it in our clipboard so that we can, it's the same as if we were to Command C or Control C on a Windows computer, right? But it copies the entire file, which is great because we want to make sure we don't mess up this copy. So it takes this copy from this particular identity file that we created earlier. It copies it into our clipboard. So then the next step you want to do is add it to your GitHub account. So what you're gonna do is go to your GitHub account online, go to your profile, and you're gonna see settings. And under settings, when you go to your settings, you scroll down a little bit, you should see something called SSH and GPG keys. So you're gonna click that, and you're gonna create a new SSH key inside of for your machine. So you can title it whatever you want. You know, I titled this like you know, personal MacBook or something, like whatever is like going to help you remember what computer is this SSH key on. I would say it's probably a good title. Then where it says key, you're going to do Command V to paste all of the stuff that you copied using that pb copy command that we just used before. So if you copied it right, you should see something come in here that is a couple lines long that just says some stuff about your SSH key, public key. Then you're gonna click add SSH key. You don't have to change anything else. Just add the title, paste the thing, and then click add. And it should show you a screen that looks kind of like this, where this should be the title of your thing. And then inside you should have your SSH key now registered inside of there. With that being the case, now you are good. You should have SSH fully set up on your GitHub account to connect to your local computer, which means that now whenever you're using and creating repos and working with repositories and stuff, you're going to want to do a slightly different step than what most people are doing with relationship to connecting to repositories. So remember, whenever we create a new repository on GitHub, right? I'm just going to create a new example repo. Whenever you create a new repository, right? It gives you a couple steps at the beginning where it says, hey, you know, git remote add origin, right? This is the most important step for connecting your local repository to your GitHub repository. The thing that you're going to want to make sure is that at the top here, instead of this toggle being set to HTTPS, right, where the link starts with HTTPS, blah, 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 you're going to want to make sure you click SSH and have this set up to be set to SSH so that whenever you set up your repos now, you're connecting your repos through SSH versus through HTTPS. Now, with all of that work we just did earlier, whenever you kind of use SSH, to connect your repositories, your code base will be able to make use of that public and private key you just created, and you'll be able to do all the operations from Git that you would need to use, and you will never get that error that's talking about, hey, you need this token or you need that thing or something else, right? It'll always SSH and thereby make it so that all of your requests to GitHub are authenticated via that SSH key that we set up. So SSH kind of makes it a little bit easier because rather than having to create a new access token and update that token and et cetera, so many times, you could just use SSH and connect to GitHub in a more secure way from your local machine, connect to these repos using SSH in general. And yeah, that's the valuable thing about connecting SSH in general to your GitHub. And once you finish that, again, it makes it so that you are pretty good. They have another step to test the connection in here so that you can kind of just see that things are working. You can run the command SSH-T git at github.com, and it will attempt to SSH into GitHub for you. So I would just run that command, git at github.com, and cool. It says, hey, you're successfully authenticated, but GitHub doesn't provide shell access, which is cool. It just is an example to show me that I'm excited. I'm authenticated. When you first run SSH-T git at github.com, you might get a little warning that says, hey, we don't know this IP address. Do you want to connect? And you just want to say yes. This is just a default kind of message you get with SSH that says, hey, I'm going to I'm gonna connect to somebody I don't know yet. Should I connect? And you just say yeah, because if you're specifically trying to connect to that host. If not, then you can say no. But for this case, we're trying to connect to GitHub. Clearly, we want to do that. So you're gonna say yes. Then it's gonna show you that default message that we just saw. So yeah, that's how SSH keys can make your life a little bit more helpful with regards to GitHub. It is a pretty easy way to make sure that you don't have to keep adding those access tokens. This is the only reason we got to do all of this is because GitHub is removing support for authenticating via email, password, and HTTPS. So using SSH is just a much better way. And it's definitely a more professional way to work with your Git repos. So I highly recommend that y'all take the time to set up your SSH stuff within your GitHub on your local environment. And again, by doing it once, you never really got to do it again. It's a pretty good way to just make sure that your account is authenticated for the long run. So yeah, what I'm gonna do is